Beshalach, and he sent God's trumpet called presence. Fourth reading from the book of Exodus. 16th reading from the Torah. Outline of Torah portion. Pillar of cloud and pillar of fire. Exodus chapter 13, verse 17 to 22. After Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not guide them to the highway that goes through the land of the Philistines, because it was close by. God thought that the people, upon seeing war, might change their minds and return to Egypt. Exodus chapter 13, verse 17. Torah says that God led the people of Israel by a roundabout route through the desert by the Sea of Surf. The closest route would have been through Philistine, and in few days they would have been in Canaan. The highway, the way of the land of the Philistines, closely followed the Mediterranean coastline. This route was guarded by a series of Egyptian garrison forts. Israelites went up from the land of Egypt fully armed. However, God did not want them to have a military confrontation and get disheartened, change their minds, and go back to Egypt. Moshe took the bones of Joseph with him, as was sworn to Joseph by oath. Exodus chapter 13, verse 19. God led the people of Israel by a pillar of cloud by day and by a pillar of fire by night, so they could travel both day and night. They traveled from Succoth and camped in Etam. Adonai had them turn back from Etam towards Egypt to encamp before Baal Zephon, an Egyptian idol, by the Red Sea. By this, Pharaoh was led to believe that Israelites were lost in the wilderness. This idol was the last idol that remained undestroyed after the 10 plagues Adonai sent on the land of Egypt. The purpose was to bait Pharaoh and to make him come after Israelites. Crossing the Red Sea. Exodus chapter 14, verse 1 to 25. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his servants had a change of heart towards the people. They said, "What have we done, letting Israel stop being our slaves?" Exodus chapter 14, verse 5. Once again, Adonai hardened Pharaoh's heart. And upon hearing that people of Israel had fled, Pharaoh prepared 600 best quality chariots and all other chariots in Egypt, along with their commanders, and pursued the Israelites. When Israelites saw Egyptians coming after them, they cried to Adonai in great fear, because they were trapped against the sea. And they argued with Moshe as to why they were taken out of the land of Egypt. But with confidence, Moshe ensured their deliverance. Moshe told them, "Stop being fearful. Remain steady. You will see how Adonai will save you. You will not see Egyptians again. Adonai will do the battle for you. Just calm yourselves down." The angel of God, who was going ahead of the camp of Israel, moved away and went behind them. The pillar of cloud moved away from front and stood behind them. It stationed between camp of Egypt and camp of Israel. Cloud grew black, and Israel camp was not visible to the Egyptian camp. A pillar of fire appeared in front of the Israelites, lighting their way. Moshe raised his hand over the sea, and Adonai caused the sea to go back before a strong east wind all night. He made the sea become dry land. Its water divided in two, forming a wall of water on the right and left, and the Israelites crossed the Red Sea safely. Pharaoh and his army drowned. Exodus chapter 14, verse 26 to 31. Egyptians began to follow in pursuit. All Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and cavalry. Just before dawn, Adonai caused the Egyptians to panic. Wheels of their chariots broke off. Upon realizing that Adonai is fighting for Israelites, they wanted to get away. But Adonai asked Moshe to raise his staff over the sea, and the water returned and covered the Egyptians, their chariots, and cavalry. The sea returned to its former depth. Not even one of them survived. God instructed Moshe to stretch out his hand over the sea to bring the waters back upon the Egyptians. But it wasn't the power of Moshe's hand that performed the miracle. God himself could have performed the miracle for the people of Israel. But the Creator God wanted Moshe to take part in his miraculous work. Moshe was elected for the purpose of delivering people of Israel from the land of Egypt. Previously, at the Red Sea, when people of Israel saw Pharaoh and his army approach them, they doubted Moshe's leadership and accused Moshe of the lowest of motivations in bringing them out of Egypt. By performing this miracle through Moshe, God vindicates Moshe and showed the people of Israel that Moshe was their chosen leader. On that day, Adonai saved Israel from the Egyptians. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore. This was an eyewitness account for the Israelites. Seeing the dead bodies of their oppressors and pursuers was the most dramatic circumstances that they ever had. With that experience, Israelites were assured of their complete deliverance and their new life. Torah says that when Israel saw the mighty deed that Adonai had performed against the Egyptians, the people feared Adonai, and they believed in Adonai and in his servant Moshe. Exodus chapter 14, verse 31. Passover is celebrated for 7 days every year as a remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. First day of the festival is a special Sabbath. 7 days represent the length of time from Exodus to crossing of the Red Sea. And the 7th day of the festival is also a special Sabbath. According to tradition, 7th day of the Passover is the anniversary of the crossing of the Red Sea. Song of Moshe, Exodus chapter 15, verse 1 to verse 19. Then Moshe and the people of Israel sang this song to Adonai. I will sing to Adonai, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he threw in the sea. Exodus chapter 15, verse 1. People of Israel were totally free only at the Red Sea. After Adonai drowned the pursuing Egyptians in the Red Sea, a spontaneous war hymn was composed and sung by Moshe and the people of Israel by the Red Sea. Song of Moshe, verse 1 to verse 5. First stanza. The Lord is a man of war. Upon seeing that their enemy drowned, they burst into joyful, spontaneous, pure worship. And it was all about God, his works, his power, his strength. Psalm begins with, I will sing to the Lord. Each individual singing to the Lord, for God triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider, he was thrown into the sea. In their worship, They identify God as their strength. And now God has become their salvation. My father's God, the God who revealed himself to their forefathers. The Lord is a man of war. He made the enemy powerless, and the enemies ceased to exist. God did on their behalf what they could not do. Verse 6 to verse 10, second stanza. You have overthrown those who rose against you. Right hand of God, glorious in power, in greatness of his excellence. He has overthrown those who came against him, his plans and purposes. The enemy was confident to pursue, overtake, and divide the spoil, but God and his plans and purposes prevailed. Verse 11 to verse 13, third stanza. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? There is no God like you among the gods, who is glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders. In your mercy, you led the people you redeemed and guided them in your strength to God's holy habitation. Verse 14 to verse 18, fourth and fifth stanza. The people will hear and be afraid. People will hear and be afraid. Philistia will be sorrowful. Edom dismayed. Moab will tremble. Inhabitants of Canaan will melt away. Fear and dread will fall on them. They will be still by the greatness of your arm. Till your purchased people pass over, you will bring and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, in your dwelling place, the sanctuary your hands have established. Verse 9 to verse 21. Miriam, Moshe's sister, leads the women in worship. Miriam was one who was gifted prophetically. She led the women into worship. Song of Miriam, Exodus chapter 15, verse 20 to 21. Also Miriam the prophet, sister of Aaron, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with tambourines, dancing. Exodus chapter 15, verse 20. Miriam was the older sister of both Moshe and Aaron. She is the sister who watched over the baby Moshe when he was placed in a basket on the river Nile to protect him from Pharaoh's decree, until Pharaoh's daughter picked him up from the water. She was called a prophetess, first of only a handful of women in scripture identified that way. She was also a poetess. She used a tambourine, an instrument to which small pieces of brass are attached, which makes a jingling noise, held in one hand and beaten up with the other. Miriam sang, "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he threw in the sea." They were jubilant and burst into spontaneous worship with singing and dancing. Bitter water made sweet. Exodus chapter 15, verses 22 to 27. Moshe led Israel onward from the Sea of Surf. They went out into the Shur desert, but after traveling 3 days in the desert, they had found no water. Exodus chapter 15, verse 22. Torah says that after walking the wilderness for 3 days, they found no water. On average, a person cannot survive longer than 3 to 4 days without drinking water. Then they arrived at Marah, found water, but They couldn't drink it because it was bitter. Mara means bitter. People grumbled against Moshe because they were thirsty and wanted water to drink. Moshe cried out to Adonai. He showed him a certain piece of wood, which when he threw into the water tasted good. God tested their faith. The Adonai made laws and rules of life for them. If you will listen intently to the voice of Adonai your God, do what he considers right, pay attention to his mitzvot, and observe his laws, I will not afflict you with any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, because I am Adonai your healer. Exodus chapter 15 verse 26. God was aware that people of Israel are going to face all these difficulties and challenges when he decided to take them on the long route through the wilderness. But in the wilderness experience, Adonai is communicating with his people, revealing himself to them, redeeming them, delivering them from the enemies, healing them, and providing for them. Anyone would have expected that God would instruct Moshe to use his staff. But in this instance, he was shown a piece of wood to throw into the water. God is sovereign. He is not limited in any way. There he tested them and made laws and rules of life for them. What Adonai required was to listen intently to his voice, do what he considers right, pay attention to his mitzvot, and observe his laws. Adonai promised that I will not afflict you with any of the diseases I brought upon the Egyptians, because I am Adonai your healer. They came to Elim. There were 12 springs and 70 palm trees. People of Israel camped there by the water. Manna from heaven. Exodus chapter 16 verse 1 to verse 36. The people of Israel said to them, we wish Adonai had used his own hand to kill us off in Egypt. There we used to sit around the pots with the meat boiling, and we had as much food as we wanted. But you have taken us out into this desert to let this whole assembly starve to death. Exodus chapter 16 verse 3. From Elim, an oasis of rest and comfort, the people of Israel arrived at the Sin desert between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of the second month after leaving the land of Egypt. Traveling through the wilderness was not an easy task. It had to be carefully navigated, especially with a multitude of people. They started complaining against Moshe and Aaron because their food supplies, which they carried from Egypt, began to run out. And because of their complaining and murmuring, they quickly started to lose sight of God's divine plan for them. Even before they went into starvation or they had to kill their animals for food, God intervened and provided for them. Adonai said to Moshe, here, I will cause bread to rain down from heaven for you. Exodus chapter 16 verse 4. This was a remarkable promise, as usually bread does not rain from heaven. God promised to give bread from heaven in the mornings. He gave instructions concerning the provision, when to gather them, and how to use them. When Israel first saw it, they asked, Man who? Meaning, what is it? Adonai commanded, let every man gather it according to each one's need. It was gathered on an individual or a family basis. Every household had to provide for itself, one omer for each person. He who gathered much had nothing left over, and he who gathered little had no lack. It was commanded not to leave any of it till morning. But some failed the test of obedience, and what they gathered in disobedience bred worms and stank. When sun became hot, it melted. Manna was gathered and prepared each morning. On the sixth day, God provided twice as much as they gathered, and they gathered twice as much. And God spoke to Israel about Sabbath. And he said, tomorrow is Sabbath, rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. In disobedience, some still went on the Sabbath day to gather manna, but they found none. And he also promised to give meat to eat in the evening. Water from the rock. Exodus chapter 17, verse 1 to 7. The people quarreled with Moshe, demanding, give us water to drink. But Moshe replied, why pick a fight with me? Why are you testing Adonai? Exodus chapter 17, verse 2. The whole community of Israel left Sin Desert, and they arrived at Rephidim, near Mount Horeb. At Rephidim, they had no water. They and their livestock were thirsty for water. They grumbled against Moshe and asked him, for what did you bring us up from Egypt? To kill us, our children, our livestock with thirst? Moshe pleaded with Adonai. He said, they are ready to stone me. One of the greatest leadership qualities of Moshe was that he always interceded on behalf of the people. He took the difficulties that he encountered with the people to the Lord. With a humble heart, he would plead for the people of Israel this time too. Once again, people failed to believe that the God who delivered them from Egypt, rescued them from Pharaoh and his army at the Red Sea, provided manna and water, could provide for them again. Their faith was tested yet again, and they failed. That place was given the name Massa and Meribah, meaning testing and arguing. Adonai instructed Moshe to go on ahead of the people and bring the elders of Israel and your staff. Adonai said, I will stand in front of you there on the rock in Horeb. You are to strike the rock, and water will come out of it, so the people can drink. Moshe did this in the sight of the leaders of Israel. Amalek defeated. Exodus chapter 17, verse 8 to 16. Moshe said to Yeshua, choose men for us, go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with God's staff in my hand. Exodus chapter 17, verse 9. Israel was camped at Rephidim when they were attacked by a nomadic tribe by the name Amalekites. Amalek may have been a grandson of Esau and chief of an Edomite tribe. Genesis chapter 36, verse 12 and 16. It is possible that they may have heard about the promise of the land of Canaan given to Jacob, Esau's twin brother. Their method of attack was the most despicable. Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 17 and 18. They attacked the rear ranks, the stragglers at the rear, when they were tired and weary, and he did not fear God. Yehoshua was chosen to fight Amalek, and as directed by Moshe, chose the men for battle. Moshe took God's staff in his hand and ascended the hilltop with Aaron and Hur. When Moshe raised his hands, Israel prevailed. When he let it down, Amalek prevailed. However, Moshe's hands grew weary. They made him sit on a stone. Aaron and Hur held his hands so that his hands stayed steady until sunset. Israel's success against Amalek was determined by the uplifted hands of Moshe. Psalms 28 verse 2. Moshe continued to pray and interceded on behalf of the people of Israel. Like any other human being, Moshe grew tired. His hands grew heavy. But he was not alone. Aaron and Hur were with him, supporting Moshe. Yehoshua defeated Amalek, putting their people to the sword.